today, 1/12/2021. Today, last week, next week, done. So today, what do we have? Demos?
Yeah, I'll have the demo that I promised last week.
Any other demo? What did I do? I did the free thing. Maybe if we have time. Then topics. What topics? Status all to the one. Nothing was merged. There was a triage last Thursday, but there was nothing special. Yes, something was, yeah, things were merged. Wait, yes, I just was on the wrong branch. So 110x now targets 4.8, the full framework 4.8. And Hermes is looking into updating some other libraries that can be upgraded to 4.8 and also like MVC Razor updates. That's the current status. Orchard core status. Dev branch this time is good. That's all. One page of changes. That's a good start for the year. So where were we last week? There. Search icon. Search icon. The search icon is
the admin content items page. It was missing in the search box.
Okay. The agency script, lowercase.
Because the folder has been renamed and is now in lowercase.
Okay.
And as you can see, there was an error on the script, the minified.
Yes. For the 10th time, it's not the first time, and it's not the last time. Fix typo. Interesting. Oh, that's just the documentation. And style block. Oh yeah, that's the new thing. Interesting. Remove tokenized and sanitized. We talked about it on triage. It's just that they were there from Orchard 1, but in Orchard core now we can do them using the full text. So they don't make sense to be there anymore. That's good. MKDocs material update, graphical update. Layers, Razor example. Tabs.
It has to be indented like this.
Okay.
When you have a liquid and a razor tabs.
Okay. Remove committed sentence in issue template. Okay. Issue template headers. Okay. Display new menu setting. Display new menu settings.
The demo I did last week about the setting to display the new menu in the admin.
And eventually it will be a feature. Though it's hard to make it a feature, well, unless there is a custom CSS added. Display new menu. True by default. Ideally, it would be false. We
to have the same behavior as the current one.
Ideally, it's false with migration step that sets it to true from previous installs, but on a new install, it will not set it to true. Otherwise, it will always be displayed, even the new setups, unless there is a custom step that sets it to false, but the default should be false now, and the migration true for the existing users. Or just remove it and tell them, well, you want it again? Well, click on the new. That's fine. So it could be false, and people will wonder where it is if they care, and then find the menu item or ask. Add badge to content type items. Who has ListPart? Badge to content type items. Who has ListPart?
The title's bad. It's actually a button for list items, like we used to have an Orchard one. We talked about it a long time ago.
Okay. Add claims provider from Mike. So extensibility of the claims provider. You used to have to inherit from this class to provide all the claims. Now they are cumulative, and there are some default ones, like user profile claims provider. Well, this one is a demo. So this one, email claims provider. So that has been extracted to its custom class, and it's possible to add custom implementations. With unit test. Where is the unit test? Here. Good shortcode liquid content conflict. So I saw the PR and so much discussion about how to fix that. And so the issue is that there is a liquid filter that can evaluate shortcodes. And there is a conflict in this case. Was there a conflict like in terms of text, like in the liquid, because there was
the conflict. Sorry, the conflict was on the content property that you can use to retrieve content items with, because we use the same property name of content for shortcodes. So the fix, if you want to see it, is on the liquid content accessor. And the template provider.
Scoop set value. So what is that? Shortcodes, template, shortcode provider. Shortcode provider, template shortcode provider. So an shortcode provider. Oh, because okay. This is a shortcode provider. So this provides shortcodes from templates in liquid. Okay, so that's only when we create shortcodes from Liquid. So much hack. Shortcode service, processing sync. HTML to shortcode, HTML to shortcodes. That's a weird name. HTML to apply shortcodes. I don't understand what it does. So is it to convert some snippet that contains shortcode to HTML?
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to do.
So why is it two shortcodes? Do we have something that says to Liquid and that's weird? Or to Markdown?
I may have named it related to the Markdown helper. It's so long ago I can't remember.
Yeah, it looks like it's based on an existing helper, but it's weird there. Maybe it's with the other one. Markdown.
Markdown to HTML. I thought I called the Markdown helper, so I'm not sure how the shortcodes helper ended up being called
so
that.
Markdown to HTML, and there might be a Liquid also something. But yeah, so here, yeah, you see that should be shortcodes to HTML.
No, it would make more sense.
Okay, so this is a name. That's okay. Just confused here. And here, when we do that, so we have shortcodes. We want to generate HTML. We have shortcodes and shape properties, content item. This is a context of what? Shortcode service. So we create a shortcode context. Is that a shortcode context? Apparently. What does a context do in a shortcode?
So it's a property that you can access from within the shortcode, either the Liquid template.
Okay, like a local scope. So we can pass, like we can share some things between shortcodes. I see.
Yeah. So we automatically put the content item in if we're rendering it through display management. But I'd left a note here to provide it as an option, so that if you needed to, you could provide it. You could pass it in the helpers and the filter.
I see. Because some shortcodes, they want to get the ambient content item.
Yeah, it just allows you to provide a little bit of context in your shortcodes. I think JP pushed for it because he was doing some localization stuff where he needed to know some data from the content item, and we decided it was not a terrible idea. So
before it was set value content. I see. Scope set value. But this is a Liquid one.
So that sets the content, that allows you to access the content of the shortcode via the value of content. So you can get it from model.content, which is the model above, or just content as an accessor. But content is also an accessor for, you do content square brackets and a slug or an alias.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where the conflict was, is that wasn't working.
Okay. So this works.
So it was a case of
one day a char will change and everything will break again. It's like balanced, but very unstable balance.
Yeah, I mean, another option which was suggested by Jasmine would have been to rename the content property there and call it something else, Shortcode, for example. But then you break everything for everybody.
Yeah, that's a very good idea to have, my ID, to have used a content property with an accessor to get the ID. Like today in Liquid, you can do content and some number, okay, some ID. And I assume that's the issue we have.
Yeah, that was the issue.
And yeah, that's bad. Because that's a property, but that's special property. So this could be the model, or this could be the, it could be anything. And here, I don't know how we do that.
Yeah, and we have some filters to do that, which is much more of a liquid way of doing it. The content square brackets seems
like we do
unusual.
Split or map turns to convert something. So maybe that's
get users.
So we have, so what are the users one? Like, is this like something like user ID or get user?
I think we ended up with get user.
Get user. I remember we talked about the it's a verb, so like map. Okay, so it's a get. And maybe by ID it could be that something like that. Yeah, maybe we should at some point refactor that, provide a new ways to do things, so there is no ambiguity and it's more standard than just and I think I did also something with the queries. We still have the queries, something like that, like blog post, something like this.
I don't know it, but I think we might. I think we got away from the verb, by the way. I just looked at the docs. It's user by ID.
Okay, so that's what we said. Okay, user by ID. That's what you say?
Yeah.
Okay. So then it would be content by ID. I know we already talked about it and found an agreement and a solution, so just trying to see, to follow that, user by user ID. User ID. Well, user ID retrieves the user ID filter, returns the user's unique ID, users by ID, loads a single or multiple user. Okay. Yeah. Wow. user ID, users by ID. It's funny, but I like it. Well, that can be confusing. People will be like, why would you do that? And I'm sure people will do that. Like, oh, to get the user, you get the property user and you do that. No, don't do that. You have it here.
Yeah. So to be fair, that feature actually needs to be updated to show that you can use the claims providers to put the information that you're wanting to retrieve in a claim, so you don't have to make a database call to find the current users.
Yeah.
You know, that was a big part of the point of that PR that we just saw from Crest guy. But that's another story. And the content one I always found confusing because there's also model.content, which is, you know, what you would use to render a shape zone.
Well, at least it's pipe query. but this is a property name for queries, just to mention. So maybe this one is just, yeah, this is just an entry point that has no value. So this is just returning like a string, because there is no IntelliSense or whatever in Liquid, and then it's passed to the query just to say. So this could have been like a string recent blog post, pipe query, or query by name, something like that.
Yeah, or query execute or.
Query is a verb also. So here we have more filters. Yeah, that's confusing because we think in terms of function calls, but Liquid doesn't have function calls. So you can just convert something into something else. Yeah, that's confusing. The same way you have content. So all this pattern here is not very Liquid. Text, yeah. So yeah, we should have the solutions to not use that things. Okay. So there is a new issue template, I've heard. Feature request. Okay. Title. Cool. Workaround for DateTimeOffset indices. I was working on that on SQL. So this one is that since SQL updates that doesn't send this object to Dapper, but now it's building its custom parameters for its custom SQL that is stored in batches. This doesn't work anymore because this was not handled correctly. And I've started adding unit tests, and I have no idea what's happening, why it worked before in Dapper and now it's not working. But I'm continuing my investigations, and by the way, I'm testing all the types, everything. And so far, I have had issues with DateTimeOffset, char, and GUID. Char is weird because Dapper says, well, can't read. Well, if I don't set the value of a char by default, like I leave it empty, it has the char number 0, but then Dapper says I can't read that, so I have to set a value. or maybe because it's empty, I don't know. And DateTimeOffset, it says I can't convert from a string to a DateTimeOffset, and same thing for a GUID. It can't convert from a string to a GUID. So I don't know why. I would have to check. Everything else is working so far. We'll see. But I'm working on that. So, but here, to fix it is just to use the datetime, because we actually don't store all the information of the DateTimeOffset in the database, because all the databases can't store everything. SQL Server supports that, but the other databases don't support that. So it's useless to try to store a DateTimeOffset. There is no reason to do that. It's nice in an API. So another way to do that would be to actually expose a DateTimeOffset, but have two other fields, maybe even public fields, that contain both the datetime and the time zone, so that when you access that, you have the two of them at the same time. But it's as good as just storing a datetime and know that's in UTC. Like, that's why in every of our properties, we add the UTC suffix, just to be sure that, to tell people that this property is in UTC. You can convert it in any time zone after, but it's stored in UTC. Yeah, so I'm still working on that. So here the local fix is to just create an index with the datetime and not the datetime offset. And that's it. That works after that. I still don't know what I will do with this datetime offset in an index. Should I actually, I don't know. Because it can't be stored. So it's like you think you will store a datetime offset, but it won't actually. Well, what it will do is that it can convert it to UTC and store it as UTC and return back the UTC. But what you saved in your offset will be lost, and you might not expect that. So that's kind of cheating. An option would be to have an analyzer such that when you try to create an index with this type, there is an error. Like in XUnit, if you try to do assert.equal null, comma something, it will tell you no, just use assert.null. So maybe an analyzer will just say, okay, no, don't put a datetime offset in your index, just store datetime. That will work. In a document, that's fine because it's JSON.NET. So if JSON.NET can serialize datetime offset, fine. I'm not sure, but maybe. Or maybe I think JSON.NET is also doing that, the conversion from UTC to UTC. So it's kind of like, again, losing data. Okay. Good. Questions? Did I miss anything? That's the transcript. Where is the chat? Nothing. Good. Demos. Dean, as promised.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Let me know where you can see that.
All good.
Okay, so this is a demo. We have a contributor, Seth Cleaver from Australia, who has a website called Cast. So he's reached out over Christmas to see if I had a little bit of time to work on a feature for him that he needed, that we do actually have an issue for him as well. This is just a little demo on that, and this is the actual issue, which was opened a little while ago from Dodie, which was about providing ways through the CMS to edit static resources like JavaScript and CSS, so that you can edit and style a site live as well in the same way that you can do with templates. So we have a module that's kind of potentially coming up, and we'll start with just the agency website, which, as you can see, is just the standard agency site. And what we're able to do then is provide static resources through an arrangement that's quite similar to layers for a variety of reasons. And I'll show you this particular resource that I created here, which would just set the body background to a different color. And if I publish this one, I'll go back over here. I'll show you on the network tab so you actually see what we're looking at. And suddenly the style is red for the background. And if we actually look at the style sheets coming through here, we've got the standard style sheet from the fonts, styles from the agency, and our custom one coming through as an actual resource. So we haven't injected this, and we haven't injected this style weirdly somewhere in the HTML. We've actually got a style sheet which we could put as much as we wanted to, all of Bootstrap in if we wanted, and edit it. And so let me explain some of the UI and some of the other features that you can do with it as well. Because it is static assets, this allows us to do things like a robots.txt file, which if I publish, you'll be able to see that as a text file. So part of the goal was to be able to do CSS and JavaScript, and part of the other goal was also to be able to just support any kind of static text file, because there's a lot of times that you need robots files or Google Ads text files or just general kind of text files for Let's Encrypt and many others. So to explain the UI and the logic a little bit, this works a little bit like layers. Well, it looks very similar to layers in that these resources, the CSS and JavaScript, are supplied in the content zone, and when the rule is always, then the HTML to load the file itself is rendered inside the page, and the file itself and the file is managed through that. So if we look at the actual page source, there's a little foo link. So that was one of the reasons for doing them with a kind of layers arrangement, is because it takes care of actually injecting them into the page as well. Now, that was reasonably important for Seth, because he's doing some tricky things with a shadow DOM where he needs to inject them at certain points in a page, which is why there's a Vue.js zone here, which means he can force them in at a particular point in the page rather than being provided through the head like you would normally do with CSS styles. So they're content items, which means that you can just add a variety of all the standard kind of content fields to them and make templates to render those in a text way. For example, with this content picker one, this allows you to actually pick other base styles from the site. So Baz is actually defined down here as an unrendered zone, and that is kind of intended to provide a bunch of base styling, which a number of other resources can kind of pick up on. So the way you do it is through a widget arrangement. So all of the ones that I've made are resource widgets rather than your standard stereotype of widget. And that's just got a content picker field on it. And the CSS one just has a text field on it using the code mirror editor. And we have a custom template that makes sure there's no actual HTML wrapping around it, just text. So they're all cached locally. So the first time you publish these, it will generate, and you can see in the case here, it's generated a document under the foo name, and there's another one with the version ID, so that as you change them, they'll be automatically refreshed as you publish a new version, which is how you keep track of them. So that would be, let me publish the other one as well. So I think if I publish this one, it's going to bring in some other CSS, and I suspect if we're lucky, nope, I think I have to publish this bit as well. So in that case, I publish the source, and this was the picker that just picked on it. And with any luck, that might just, still not going black. No, picker's lost it. Published. Okay, seem to have lost why that one's not rendering anything. There's a JavaScript one here as well, which that's why I have the window open, which is just at the moment writing that in there as well. I'm not sure how relevant the JavaScript editing JavaScript will be for people. It's more likely to be in line on the page, but part of the point of making these widgets was it allows you to do anything you want rather than being a little more limited. Originally, when we thought about this, I thought it might be more like the templates where you just have a text box where you can put in a bit of CSS or a bit of JavaScript and give it a file name, but it turned out really useful to have the options of rules around when they're going to be rendered in the document, and the idea of having content pickers to and reuse the existing fields that we have to make it a little bit more manageable. So the idea would be that this one down here might contain all of your styles for the site, and this one up here is just some special overrides that this particular user of this particular tenant wants to override. So yeah, that was the demo, and if it's of interest, then we'll probably look to put it through as a PR as well.
Questions?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there'll be many questions.
Many questions, suggestions, comments, all the things. That's good. My suggestion, my question would be, why not use the media items to store JavaScript and CSS, and use what you did here with the resource layers and edit resources to just pick those files to inject them where you want, when you want.
So that's an option, but one of the key things that was of need is an editor in the CMS. If you were to store them in the media library, they become served under
The media.
Under /media, which is not appropriate for something like the robots text file, which has to be stored at the root.
Yeah, but
there's literally no choice on that, and so many of the other static text type files need to be stored at the root. There would be the possibility of
they don't
putting
need to be
CSS
stored,
under
they need to have a URL that's rooted.
Exactly.
Just making that distinction. Maybe I missed that. Did you talk about permissions around that feature? Because there is a security aspect to that, right?
Absolutely, because you could do a lot with being able to custom inject JavaScript or well, particularly JavaScript. So in terms of the widgets themselves, permissions are for those are managed through content item permissions, and the resources themselves have a permission to access them, and the zones. So that was kind of one of the reasons with actually pushing them through as content items as widgets, is to get some of the other benefits that come with that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that it should be very locked by default. I mean, just restricted to very high privileges.
I would agree.
By default.
Yeah, and one of the, like for example, where I talked about the kind of main sites, CSS, that's something that you would probably want to make a custom content type of, so that you can very much restrict access to that. Where you might be giving an editor or it's kind of a site admin more access to little tweaks or being able to provide overrides.
Yeah, makes sense.
So one of the other options would be storing in the media library, but you get no editor for it.
Well, there is an issue for that. The editor could have been on the media, like you click edit on the JavaScript and it opens an editor for the file. The same way there was no center picker for images and you made one. So
absolutely.
So that could be a thing. I think that's sad that because you said, well, maybe it wasn't the reason, but you discovered that you could also do that for robust TXT. But it's sad to say, well, we have to do it this way because we can do robust TXT. I mean, that's a different concern. And there are SEO tools and modules that might want to edit the robust TXT and many other things that are not related to source and location. So,
and that's true. And if you look on my GitHub account, you'll find a robots text editor because needed one of those, so I wrote it. It just kind of became useful that it could do some other things.
And media also, the media files, the PNGs, they are in the media folder, but they are dynamic. So if you want static media files, you put them in your theme, in your dub root, and they don't have any prefix. So same thing for JavaScript. If they are not dynamic, well.
The point with this one was the need to get dynamic editing.
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't expect to do. Myself, I would probably bundle most of my stuff, and if we were to use this feature, it would be much more on we need to make a quick tweak, and we'll update the source code at a later point, or something.
I still think that placing the script in the CSS and editing the script in the CSS are two different things. Because I might want to have a theme that uses my editable CSS and JavaScript, but I never want to change them. They are global. So paying the price of a layer to be able to edit it, it's kind of sad.
Well, you wouldn't do this for everything. This is to fit a specific need, I suppose.
But what if I want to edit a CSS, my CSS?
The CSS that's bundled in your DLL file.
Yeah, or part of my theme, which is the same way templates and content. Maybe we have an issue for that. Like we should be able to edit CSS files or JavaScript files per tenant. And then, yes, it's not a static file that comes with the theme, but something that can be editable. And the same as media items, like when we set up the whatever recipe, we provide some images, and I can replace images, I can add images, and I can pick them up and use them in my content item. So here, I would say the same way, I should be able to add a CSS and a JavaScript file to the same folders and be able to edit it optionally. Yeah, and then placing them per layer in zones, for me, is a different thing. So this way, let's say you define that this CSS is only visible on these pages, and this CSS is only visible on these pages. This is what you did here is the layers. But when I go to media and I edit the CSS,
that was what the feature required or requires, and it's useful.
And what I'm saying is that I would have liked to see that split. It's kind of here, yeah. It's kind of a mismatch to me. So it's like, yeah. Because now, if I want to edit CSS, well, I have this feature, but I'm afraid that there will be then two features to edit CSS. This one and the other one. And this one is just useful, will just be useful to be able to have the layers things. So it's like duplicating some logic to be able to edit a CSS and JavaScript file. But I don't expect that most websites will need to dynamically change where and when the CSS / JavaScript is injected, but more to be able to change the CSS and the JavaScript more often than just moving them. That's why the feature about editing the files might be more important than moving them.
That's probably true. The ability to use layers really works for this particular need, and that may not be a need that everything else shares. One of the problems with kind of online editing of a JavaScript file is that, or a CSS file, is that they're often going to be minified.
Well, the ones you want to edit, it can't be minified, or you minify them with a different tool, but that doesn't change the issue here. You edit them, they are not minified either. What I'm saying is that what you want to be able to edit, I know, I get it, but still, I don't buy the argument of they are minified. Yes, they are if they're minified, good luck changing them. So that's not, you're not solving anything here if you let people edit them. Just talking about the files that we want to be able to edit. Or your resource here, when you pick a JavaScript or CSS, there is an option to say and minify. Or even better. Ready? We have something called image sharp, which zips, like compresses images. Why not have a command handler that when it's a CSS, it compresses the CSS or the JavaScript? So you can still edit that the same way we did PNGs on the backend. But when it's served, it can be compressed. And the fact that you inject them in a layer is independent. You just inject the resource dependency where you want, but they will still be served using the logic to serve them from static files and compress them optionally. You can ask Zoltan, did that in Archibald.
So one of the reasons for having a comma separated list of file names here was to be able to provide to a handler that would know that it should be served under the under a minified version, and there's some event handlers that you can hook into to minify it.
So how do you do that? Here you provide file names. I would have expected that you could have, because it's a resource, it's a resource dependency thing. We have notion of minify and debug and release versions. Okay, and that should be two text boxes here with two different file names. And if it was like the same way we have today with images, we can say query string in the query string of the URL. Can say with equals whatever. So here you could say you want the minified one there and the non-minified one there, or just one which is a minified one.
Yeah, rather than doing two text boxes, because it covers more if you provide more options, and just provide a simple comma separated list, and depending on the debug settings of the site, it will serve under either name, which then gives you a handler to hook into. So if we look at this one here, it comes through as foo.css. I suspect if we change the site settings to use the minified version. I haven't tested this, so I don't know if it works, but it should do because I wrote it. Then we get the minified version coming through. that picks up on that name or that file extension. It's not minified at the moment, but the hooks are there for handlers, and this project here looks quite promising. I was looking at it this afternoon to just catch that and catch it on at the time that it's being cached. So they get served in a cache folder off the www root, as we've done before for the media cache.
Yeah. See, when I say that it could also work the same with the CSS and JavaScript, that will also be stored there because the handler to cache them will handle that based on the name of the query string and return the correct file name the same way you did for the images.
Yeah, so it's a very similar principle to that. Some of the advantages of having this as those content items is that I get version numbers which can be used for the files, which handles the clearing a lot better.
Same as
PNG.
PNG.
Change. Sorry?
Same as PNG.
No, it's different. It's slightly different there to the Azure stuff because it doesn't, because we don't have an identifier for media because it has no database entry. So it's more challenging to change a file that is cached, like to replace it with a new file.
But how do we do that today with media? We do that, right?
So we've got an event handler at the moment, and if we were to delete this and make it look like the media one, we have an event handler which kicks off locally, but we don't have, which will delete the file if it's from the cache if it's been changed, and then a new one will be created when a new one's uploaded. We haven't got a good way to handle that through distributed yet, which we need to figure out with JT, because we have no versioning numbers or information. We might consider looking at using a date as part of the file name and tweaking it, but there's some ideas that we need to kind of get together on that one.
Okay.
So yes, this could be an editor in terms of what Orchard itself might need. For this particular site, it was really useful to see them as content items with rules as well, because we could apply a range of different rules just to inject things in different places that we need them. And
my other comment about the layers is that I think we need an abstract layer, something that when we say add a layer, we should be able to choose what type of layer we want, like JavaScript based or existing one, because the always and never, they don't need a JavaScript engine to run. We should have something hard-coded or providers URL based, things like this, stuff that we know we'll always need and we don't need to run JavaScript for that. And then there is a JavaScript one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually tweaked, and I must do a PR for it. I tweaked the never rule because there's already some checks on the layer filters which says if it's empty, just assume it's false. But I think we should definitely have some C# rules there that are common, because we don't need to run JavaScript for that. In the same way that in recipes we've got the JS : we could have CS : for some specific well-known rules.
Well, that or just the way we do for steps, like there is a step provider, there is a layer provider, there is JavaScript layer provider, and there is a whatever layer provider, and then you can, and I mean, you can create a new JavaScript layer, and then you will be able to change the property, which will be JavaScript, and you give it a name. But the always layer, there is no property. the same way we do for steps. Some of them don't have properties, some of them have properties. And then the always layer will not have a property. It will just be some C# code. But the JavaScript layer type will just be JavaScript editor to have a dynamic thing. This way, when we load the layers, we instantiate the concrete type, and then the always one will be just an object that returns true and done. And all the layers can be cached in memory, and then the JavaScript one will run again and again and again, but the other ones, they won't run anything. So we don't need JavaScript all the time. It's just optionally. We can have JavaScript. The same way also for workflows. We have workflows that do things, and there is one that is do some JavaScript thing. So you can add custom logic instead of predefined logic. Same way for layers. So this way we won't pay the price of JavaScript for all the layers we have today, including now the resources.
Yeah, that makes good sense. You know, especially considering most of the time when you're doing standard widgets, you're just using either the always, which is very common, or the homepage rule, which should not need to run JavaScript to do that. That's something that we can code. So I agree there. Absolutely.
Now, can't you use just the widgets? This one to inject the resources? Have a resource widget?
You kind of could, but it gets a little bit more tricky. Because it just seemed worthwhile to have them split. And for example, if you added a resource widget here, then that would suddenly be available on other pages to insert, and would make no sense in that context. So
I don't agree. I don't agree. It would have made sense also. I have a content item. It's a custom blog post. I want to inject a custom CSS. I don't have to create a layer. I just inject it as a widget.
Sure, but if you're making a page.
Sorry. Yeah, page. I mean, wherever you can already add a widget, you could also add CSS. It doesn't bother me at all.
For me, I don't want to be giving my customers the ability to insert a resource here.
Yeah.
At all. That's crazy.
So
maybe I want to stick a resource in, but that bit of it, I want to be able to at least secure, so that it's not showing up on
the same thing that wasn't for the dashboard, which is a custom type of widget. Well, that's what we did in the end, but well, not really much.
Yeah, there's not a lot of
okay.
There's a lot of reuse.
Okay. Doesn't make sense to create a specific type for a single thing, which is called a resource. Yeah, but at the same time, it's just one, so it will be called resource. So people will see, hey, there is a resource here. Fine. What does it do? Don't use it.
Exactly, but in the same way that widgets. But that's what stereotypes are for. Is it wouldn't be the first time that I've added a specific stereotype to a site for some stuff where we needed some reuse of content items before. It's like we have menu items. You can't inject them on a page either, but they have a use and a reason.
Okay, good. Thank you.
No problem.
So, sharing my screen. Questions, comments? I'll do that next week to fill the time if we have too much time. We'll see. So that's it. Meeting on Triage on Thursday. Same as usual. Next meeting next Tuesday, it's not a special day, just Monday is Martin Luther King Day. Tuesday is fine for us. So next meeting next week. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.